The NBA TV ratings have been a central topic of discussion all season long, where according to reports, the NBA viewership has been on a steady decline over the past decade. And I think one simple rule change by the NBA could massively improve the overall viewing experience. But before I get into my idea, I want to first quickly dive into the viewership of the league and the real reasons why I think the ratings have been going down. Now, to gain some clarity, TV ratings for most sports have been going down across the board. Men's and women's college basketball was down this year. I've read reports that the NHL's viewership has also been dipping, as well as the MLB's. And granted, baseball did have a big jump during the playoffs and World Series, but I think that could be due to their most historic franchise, the New York Yankees, making it all the way to the World Series. Now, obviously, the elephant in the room with this ratings discussion is going to be the NFL. Viewership for football has been holding pretty steady over the past decade, and that also includes college football. But from a viewership standpoint, it doesn't really make sense to compare the NBA ratings to the NFL's. First, there's a total of 17 games played in an NFL season, compared to 82 games played in the NBA, and that by itself is the setup to get high viewership. Your favorite NFL team plays once a week, pretty much every game is going to be on cable TV, plus most of the matchups are on Sundays, when the fans are free from work and school. Now compare that to the NBA regular season, where your favorite team plays 3 to 4 times a week, with 1 or maybe 2 games on live TV a month, unless you're the Lakers or Golden State. And then on top of that, many of the live games are in the middle of the week, when most people are bogged down with life. It's pretty clear that the NFL has the setup to get better and more consistent ratings. And obviously, 17 games throughout a season on live TV is bound to trend higher than 82 games that are mostly on private streams. And speaking of private streams, this is the perfect time to transition and talk about League Pass, which I think has a couple of problems. First, the NBA is currently charging over $110 for League Pass every season. And for premium, that number is over $150. Now personally, if I'm going to spend this much money to access every NBA basketball game, I'm going to expect to get access to every NBA basketball game. But that's just not the case with League Pass. As it stands, both local and nationally televised games are blacked out on League Pass. So if you don't have cable, YouTube TV, or anything like that, you're pretty much out of luck. And this generally pushes fans away from purchasing the service, and most likely stream games online. Now, I'm not going to justify or judge people doing that, but I think the limitations of League Pass are definitely affecting the NBA's trackable viewership. So overall, I think those are the biggest reasons for the NBA's viewership dropping. Most of your favorite team's games aren't on live TV, and the other alternative streaming services are inconsistent at best, which leads to fans finding an alternative way to watch their games. Now, there is one more important topic we have to go over before we get into my actual rule change, and that's going to be the NBA's massive jump of 3-point volume. Over the past 1 or 2 years, this has become a pretty popular talking point by the media and former NBA players.
At its core, the NBA's popularity is based on, is that dude flying? Holy shit. Like, here's another 35-footer.
But if you're just going to come out and have a 3-point shooting contest every night.
Now, obviously, there is some downsides to teams taking 40+ threes a game. There's nothing fun about watching below average shooters clank threes early in the shot clock. But at the same time, I think we're currently in one of the most entertaining and dynamic eras of NBA basketball. Because while there is a big jump in 3-point volume, there's also a big jump in driving, where that outside shooting spreads out the defense and opens up the paint, clearing up the lane for drives and explosive plays at the rim. And over the past decade, the NBA has been seeing a consistent increase in dunks at the rim, which has tracked very consistently with the up and 3-point volume. And then individually, I think the talent in the league is at an all-time high. Nikola Jokic and Luka Doncic are both generational passers. The NBA's current leading scorer, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, is one of the best isolation scorers I've ever seen. And he's doing it at all 3 levels. Plus you have Victor Wembanyama, who's already an all-star, who also has the potential to be in the GOAT conversation. I think the game right now is filled with all-time level offensive talent. But personally, I don't even think this is the best part of modern basketball. But this then leads to another fallacy I commonly hear, which is that teams don't play defense. With the jump in outside shooting and offenses playing with more space, defenses have been stretched and playing catch up with the evolving offenses over the past decade. But I think some teams are beginning to make up that ground. By far, my two favorite teams to watch this year have been the Rockets and Thunder, where both of those squads have speed and quickness all over the floor, which allows them to run the offense off the line and funnel them into difficult twos and turnovers. Both the Rockets and Thunder primarily use their quickness to wreak havoc. But then we're also seeing teams like Orlando and Cleveland, who primarily lean on their length and size to both run shooters off the line and clog up driving lanes. I think defense today is the most valuable it's been in any era of the NBA, and it's enough by itself to carry a below average offense deep in the postseason. The perfect example is the Minnesota Timberwolves last year, where they made it to the Western Conference Finals with a subpar offensive rating. And that emphasis on defense is clearly what we're seeing from NBA front offices, where slowly but surely the best defenders in the league are all young guys. You have Chet Holmgren, Dyson Daniels, the Thompson twins, and many others. And before his injury, Wemby was the frontrunner to win Defensive Player of the Year in just his second season. I think the individual defensive talent and team schemes is slowly catching up with the NBA's offensive boom. So I'm sure most of you are either confused or think I'm totally full of crap. If the NBA currently has all-time great offensive and defensive talent, then why are viewerships down? And why is it so painful to get through an entire NBA basketball game? Well, I think there's one main problem, and that's the flow of the game. According to Google, the average time for an NBA game this year is about 2.5 hours. And in preparation for this video, I did track the length of games myself. And I found that most games tend to run longer than that 2.5 hour mark. But let's be generous and say that the game time is 2.5 hours, which adds up to 150 total minutes, which means that under 1/3 of the runtime for an NBA game is actual live basketball. And I think this is the biggest issue with the product right now. When you sit down to watch a game, there's countless of stoppages. You have media timeouts, coaches challenges, reviewing flagrant fouls, while also having the end of quarters and halftime. In today's game, it's very rare to get at least 3 to 4 minutes of consistent live action. And this leads to my one major rule change, which is to ban coaches' timeouts, meaning both teams get a total of 0 timeouts throughout the course of the game. And to clarify, the NBA still gets 1 media timeout each quarter, while also having breaks at the end of quarters and halftime. So there's still points of the game where the coaches can make adjustments. Plus, they can still sub during dead balls and free throws. And then along with banning coaches' timeouts, I think the NBA should also have an additional ref behind the scores table, whose primary role is to deal with coaches' challenges and flagrant fouls. I think it's complete overkill for the refs to stop the game, walk over to the scores table, and take 3 to 5 minutes to come to a conclusion on a call that we can see plain as day on TV after 10 seconds. Literally every NBA team has an assistant coach behind the bench who can get an accurate replay literally seconds after a call and decide whether or not to challenge it. Again, I think it's ridiculous to stop for 4 minutes to make an obvious call. Just add one more ref behind the scores table, give him full access to the replay, and let him make the call. Now the point of all this is to bring as much flow to the game as possible. Fans should get 5 to 6 minutes of uninterrupted basketball. Now of course, any rule change will have some downsides, but I think there's either logical fixes or the pros outweigh the cons. First, I'm well aware that the NBA is a business, and more timeouts does bring more ad revenue. But I think an easy adjustment is to just make the timeouts themselves longer. For example, media timeouts are currently 3 minutes and 15 seconds. You could extend it to 4.5 or 5 minutes, which of course is longer, but at least the fans are getting 6 minutes of uninterrupted play. And I think that ratio is better than random timeouts every 2 to 4 minutes. Now the other potential drawback to less timeouts is that teams and coaches won't be able to make adjustments through the course of the game, which is true. If teams go on a big run, there's going to be no more calling timeouts to break that momentum. But I'd argue this is actually a positive, because we'll then see teams be forced to dig deep and make adjustments on the fly, or get absolutely clobbered. I like to use this example. In boxing or the UFC, if we see a fighter get rocked, the corner doesn't get to call an immediate timeout. The fighter in that moment has to figure it out or get knocked out. And those moments are always the most exciting part of the fight. I want to see the same thing with basketball. I want to see the best players get tested and problem solve on the fly. So overall, the point of this setup is to bring more flow to the games. Less timeouts will take away all these micro adjustments throughout the game and let players just go out and hoop. And most importantly, this will also make the live and TV experience much better. So that's all I got for this mini rant. I appreciate you stopping by to watch this video, and I'm looking forward to you guys tearing this idea apart in the comments. The kid's here.